We tend to think of flying as this precise science, right? It's all about mechanics, physics, and hard numbers. But what happens when the most powerful computer on the plane, the human brain, gets tricked by something as simple as a strip of pavement?
Okay, just imagine this for a second. You're a pilot, you're roaring down the runway at Catalina Island, picking up speed. But this runway has a big hump in the middle, and for a split second, that's the exact thought that flashes through your mind. It's a real gut-wrenching feeling that pilots have to deal with, a moment where what your eyes are seeing and what's actually happening just don't match up.
So how is this even possible? How can a simple strip of asphalt fool the mind of a highly trained, experienced pilot? Well, the answer is pretty fascinating, and it all comes down to the tricky intersection of our perception and cold, hard reality.
And look, this isn't about pilots making rookie mistakes, not at all. These illusions are a known, well-documented challenge in aviation. They're a huge part of what's called human factors, and every single pilot out there trains specifically to spot these visual traps and, more importantly, to overcome them.
So what exactly is a runway illusion? Well, think of it like this. Your brain sees a picture, takes a shortcut, and then jumps to a conclusion. It extrapolates based on what it thinks it's seeing, and in the process, it creates this false mental map of where the plane actually is in space. All right, let's dive into the first major category of these illusions, and it all has to do with the slope of the runway.
Now this is where it gets really counterintuitive. It's kind of wild. When you're coming in to land on a runway that slopes up, your brain tells you, whoa, you're way too high. But when the runway slopes down, your brain starts screaming the opposite. You're too low, pull up, even if your altitude is perfect.
And here's where the danger comes in. If a pilot listens to that false feeling of being too high on an upsloping runway, what do? They instinctively push the nose down, flying a lower approach. That overcorrection can be totally disastrous, causing them to land short of the pavement entirely.
And on the flip side, if you feel like you're way too low because of a downsloping runway, the natural reaction is to fly a higher approach to compensate. The risk there? You could touch down way too far down the runway with not enough room to stop, or even overshoot the whole thing.
Okay, so it's not just about the up and down slope. The runway's width can play just as powerful a trick on a pilot's mind. It really is all about perspective.
I love this example because it just says it all. Imagine you learn to fly on some tiny 40-foot-wide country airstrip. Then one day, you have to land at Philadelphia International on a runway that's a massive 200 feet wide. The visual shock is immense. What feels totally normal to a commercial pilot can feel completely alien to someone else.
So here's the trick. When you're used to a nice, wide runway, coming up on a narrow one makes your brain think the plane is way higher off the ground than it actually is. It's a simple mental shortcut, right? Your brain sees smaller and thinks farther away, or in this case, higher up.
So let's just lay it out, side by side to make it super clear. A narrow runway makes you feel like you're too high. But a runway that's much wider than you're used to, it does the exact opposite. It creates this powerful, convincing illusion that you are much, much lower to the ground than you really are.
And you can probably guess the risk here. If you feel too high because of that skinny runway, the gut instinct is to pitch the nose down. But that leads to a dangerously low, shallow approach. And that's when you risk hitting an obstacle or, again, undershooting the runway.
And yep, the exact opposite is true for a wide runway. You feel too low, so you fly a higher approach. This can cause a pilot to flare. That's when you pull the nose up right before touchdown, way too early, stalling high above the pavement, or just missing their target landing spot completely.
So, this all leads to a really, really important question. We've just established that in critical moments, a pilot's own eyes can straight up lie to them. So, if you can't trust what you see, what can you trust?
The answer is, you learn to trust the tech over the trick. Pilots are trained to fly by the numbers, to rely on the cold, hard, objective truth coming from their instruments, instead of the subjective and sometimes totally wrong feelings generated by their own brain. So how do they do it? Well, they learn to trust their altimeter for their exact height and their vertical speed indicator, or VSI, for their rate of descent. They use electronic guidance systems that give them a perfect, reliable glide path. They study airport charts ahead of time so they can anticipate these illusions. But maybe most importantly, they train themselves to do one of the hardest things you can imagine, to flat out ignore what their own body is screaming at them.
So what's the big takeaway from all this? For me, it gives you a whole new appreciation for that human factor in flying. You realize it's about so much more than just mastering a machine.
Ultimately, it's about mastering your own mind. It's a powerful reminder that for any pilot, the flight isn't just about getting from point A to point B. The most important, and sometimes the most challenging journey, is navigating that complex and sometimes deceptive space between what you see and what is actually real.